In the grandeur of Windsor Castle, under the unforgiving gaze of the world, a royal line was drawn, leaving Camilla humiliated and William unyielding. What should have been a glittering evening of royal unity became the stage for a deeply personal battle that shattered the illusion of harmony. As cameras flashed and dignitaries mingled beneath the vaulted ceilings, whispers rippled through the crowd when Queen Camilla, radiant yet visibly rattled, fought to conceal her anguish. Just outside the grand gates, her son, Tom Parker Bowles, stood stranded and excluded, denied entry by royal command. For the first time in years, the facade cracked, revealing a raw and unspoken tension that no crown or title could mask. The Windsor Charity Gala had been meticulously planned as an opulent celebration, meant to showcase the monarchy's enduring commitment to service and tradition. It should have been a triumphant evening for King Charles and Queen Camilla, a moment to reinforce their place in the hearts of the nation. Yet, the air was thick with something far more dangerous than ceremonial resentment. Guests felt it immediately as they entered, sensing a chill that no warmth of hospitality could fully dispel. The host and hostess smiled for the cameras, but their strained expressions betrayed what words never could. This was no ordinary evening. A storm was brewing behind the regal courtesies. Then came the moment that no one could ignore. As the last of the guests arrived, all eyes turned toward the entrance. But instead of the expected procession, the quiet murmur grew louder, confusion washing over the crowd. Outside, Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son, and a respected figure in his own right, was stopped by palace security and turned away. Even those well-versed in royal protocol were stunned. This wasn't just a misstep or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, and its execution in full view of the public left no doubt about who was behind it. Inside, Camilla's face paled, her practiced poise faltered, her lips pressed tight to fight back tears. The cameras didn't catch her weeping outright, but those near enough saw the glisten in her eyes and the slight quiver in her composure as she retreated into the shadows of the great hall. The astonishment in the room was palpable. Murmurs grew louder, some guests exchanging uneasy glances, others frozen in disbelief. This was a breach of royal etiquette, so stark, so public, it defied imagination. Here, in the very heart of Windsor, Prince William had made his statement not just to Camilla, but to everyone watching. It was a choice that risked not only his relationship with his stepmother, but also the stability of the monarchy itself. Why would he risk such a spectacle? Why now, at such a crucial moment? And what unseen wounds had festered between them to erupt in such a shocking display? To understand this explosive confrontation, we must first uncover the hidden layers of rivalry between the future king and the queen consort. Behind William's steely resolve lies a childhood, scarred by betrayal, loss, and a promise to his mother. Long before Windsor's walls echoed with confrontation, a boy destined for the throne was learning what it meant to carry the weight of a crown that often felt like a curse. William entered the world not as a child free to dream, but as an heir who belonged more to the public than to himself. From his earliest moments, he stood in the crossfire of duty and desire, shaped by a mother who fought fiercely to protect him from the monarchy's suffocating grip, while preparing him to one day lead it. Diana's warmth became his sanctuary, her love the shield against an institution that, to her, was as cold as stone. Yet even her fierce devotion couldn't protect him from the cracks that widened in the royal family, or from the devastation that would soon shatter his innocence. He grew into boyhood, watching his parents' marriage unravel under relentless scrutiny, absorbing the whispers, the bitterness, the quiet despair. Every glance, every headline, every fleeting silence taught him that love within the palace walls often came second to appearances outside them. As he watched his mother struggle, he learned early that his feelings would always be at war with his responsibilities. Even when his heart cried out, he was expected to stand tall, to endure a lesson that hardened his resolve, but left scars he would carry into manhood. When Diana spoke of kindness, he listened. When she warned him never to let the institution swallow him whole, he promised her silently that he never would. Then came the night. The world stopped. The crash that took his mother left him standing at the threshold of adulthood far too soon, his grief twisted by the same cameras that had hounded her to the end. In the years that followed, his mistrust of Camilla deepened, not simply because she had taken his mother's place at his father's side, but because her presence was a daily reminder of the pain Diana endured. He swallowed his resentment as duty demanded, but it festered quietly beneath his carefully measured words and public civility. Every step Camilla climbed within the royal ranks felt to him, like a betrayal of everything his mother had endured. Yet after Queen Elizabeth II's death, William's sense of duty crystallized into something even stronger. He knew the monarchy's survival would one day rest in his hands, and though the pain of the past still haunted him, he steeled himself to honor both the crown and his mother's memory. In time, he became a man who could walk the tightrope between tradition and modernity, pushing the monarchy forward while anchoring it to its ancient roots. Every decision he made balanced these opposing forces, earning him admiration even from those who doubted him. But while William sought to honor his mother's memory quietly, Camilla's rise made silence impossible. She clawed her way into the monarchy, but no crown could shield her from whispers of unworthiness. From the very beginning, Camilla carried a burden no title could erase. To many, she was not the queen consort of England, but the shadow behind the fall of a fairy tale, the woman who stepped into a story that never truly belonged to her. Her presence in the infamous triangle with Charles and Diana ensured that she would never be viewed without suspicion, no matter how many years passed or how many hands she shook. For decades, she remained the quiet figure on the sidelines, always close, always watching, yet never fully embraced. And yet, through sheer determination, she refused to retreat into obscurity. She fought not only for Charles's love, but also for her own place within the royal narrative, even if that place came at an impossible cost. The path toward acceptance was nothing short of brutal. Public scorn trailed her through every corridor of Buckingham Palace. The late Princess Diana's supporters, fiercely loyal to her memory, viewed Camilla as an intruder, a living emblem of betrayal and heartbreak. Her marriage to Charles in 2005 was met with muted applause and sharp criticism, a union that the monarchy itself had struggled to justify. Even after she became Duchess of Cornwall, she knew her every move would be scrutinized, her every word dissected for traces of arrogance or overreach. For Camilla, the price of love was a lifetime of judgment, a relentless reminder that the crown could adorn her head but not silence the doubts that clung to her name. Yet she persisted. Over time, she embraced roles that allowed her to contribute in ways that mattered, advocating for literacy, raising awareness for domestic abuse, standing alongside survivors with quiet dignity. These efforts softened some hearts but never erased the old resentments. Even as she carried out her duties faithfully, there remained an invisible barrier between her and the public, between her and those within the royal family who saw her less as an equal and more as an unwelcome necessity. Every smile she wore in public was a mask over the lingering sting of exclusion. Every compliment from the press, a fragile victory over decades of quiet hostility. When Charles finally ascended to the throne and she became queen consort, the crown itself seemed heavy with contradiction. This was her long-awaited moment of triumph, yet it only sharpened the tension that already hummed beneath the surface. For those who could not forget Diana, Camilla's rise felt like a provocation. Within the royal circle itself, her growing influence threatened to disrupt carefully preserved traditions, and while she stood beside the king at grand events, there were still whispers, still glances, still unspoken doubts that she would ever truly belong. These opposing forces, William's loyalty and Camilla's ambition, clashed dramatically that fateful evening. Under the shimmering chandeliers of Windsor Castle, one name on the guest list ignited a royal firestorm. What was intended as a flawless evening of charity and unity quickly unraveled into a spectacle of power and humiliation that no one in attendance would soon forget. The Windsor Charity Gala, wrapped in splendor and ceremony, was supposed to remind the world that the monarchy still stood strong, its traditions intact, its family unbroken. Yet beneath the glittering surface, a far more turbulent truth was waiting to erupt. As the guests arrived in gowns and tails, the polished air of celebration began to thin, replaced by the sharp scent of scandal that clung to every corner of the room. The event had been planned months in advance, every detail scrutinized, every name on the guest list debated with precision. But one name, Tom Parker Bowles, became the point on which the entire evening turned. Camilla, determined to assert not only her own place in the monarchy, but also her son's right to stand at her side, had pressed for his inclusion. To her, it was a natural step, a quiet declaration that her family, too, belonged within these hallowed walls. But to William, it was nothing short of heresy. Bound by blood and duty, he saw the monarchy as sacred, an institution built not merely on affection but on lineage and hierarchy. Tom's presence, however polished his reputation outside these walls, threatened to dilute that carefully guarded order. William's refusal was not simply a decision, it was a statement. and it was absolute. When the final guest list was announced, Tom's name was conspicuously absent. Camilla, unwilling to accept defeat, reportedly made repeated appeals. Each one met with the same unyielding answer. The lines had been drawn long before the first guests arrived that night. But it was at the gates of Windsor that the conflict would come to light. Tom, dressed for the occasion and assured by his mother's confidence, approached the castle as though he belonged only to be stopped cold by palace security. Orders had come directly from William, and no amount of name or status could override them. In full view of other arriving guests, Tom was turned away, his humiliation silent but devastating. Inside, Camilla learned of her son's rejection almost as it happened. Those who watched closely saw the moment her expression faltered, the moment the queen consort's mask of composure slipped ever so slightly. She stood there, forced to smile, to greet dignitaries and pose for photographs, while knowing her son waited outside, humiliated and excluded. Every polite nod and practiced laugh that evening was a battle against the anger and sorrow boiling just beneath her skin. To the cameras, she remained regal. But to anyone who truly looked, she was fighting to hold herself together. But this wasn't just a matter of protocol. It was a battle over legacy and loyalty. In every decision he makes, echoes of Diana's pain still guide his hand. Even now, decades after her passing, her memory shapes William's vision of the monarchy, acting as both compass and burden. It is impossible to separate his choices from the profound loyalty he feels toward the mother who fought so desperately to shield him from the cold machinery of royal life. Her struggles, her humiliation, her tragic end live in him, informing his instincts and stiffening his resolve whenever the sanctity of her legacy feels threatened. And on that fateful evening at Windsor, as he stood against Camilla's request, it wasn't merely about protocol. It was about protecting the memory of the woman who once whispered to him that he must never let the crown swallow his heart. From the moment Camilla's family began edging closer to the royal spotlight, discomfort stirred within him. It was subtle at first, unspoken yet undeniable. Their presence, their ease within halls where Diana once walked, felt to William like an erasure of everything she endured to protect her sons. To him, allowing Tom Parker Bowles into such a sacred royal event risked reducing Diana's sacrifice into something forgettable, something disposable. It wasn't about Tom as a man, it was about what he symbolized, a blending of families that, in William's eyes, could only come at the expense of the woman he vowed never to betray. So he acted, and when the moment came to decide between appeasing Camilla or preserving his mother's dignity, his choice was inevitable. In his mind, Tom's inclusion would have been more than just a gesture of goodwill. It would have been a quiet rewriting of history, a subtle suggestion that what Diana endured no longer mattered. William could not abide. Even as he maintained his public composure, he carried a silent defiance, a steadfast refusal to let her memory be diminished. And so, he enforced the boundaries she once fought for, in his own way, continuing her battle long after she was gone. Her influence lingers in everything he does, though he rarely speaks of it. In the charities he champions, in the way he approaches his children with warmth she was often denied. In the careful balance he strikes between tradition and compassion, all of it bears Diana's mark. Yet this loyalty comes at a cost. Every decision to honor her pulls at him, complicating his own journey, trapping him between the man he wants to be and the king he is expected to become. The weight of her memory is both his armor and his chain. Camilla, however, saw the snub not as principle, but as a deeply personal betrayal. That night, a mother's heart broke behind the regal mask she wore so well. Even as the world watched her glide through the grand halls of Windsor, greeting guests with carefully measured grace, Camilla felt every step grow heavier, every smile more brittle. Inside, she was reeling not just from the humiliation of her son's rejection, but from the cruel reminder that no matter how hard she fought, her family would never truly belong in the monarchy's inner sanctum. The sight of Tom turned away at the gates, left standing under the weight of centuries-old protocol, was more than a slight. To her, it was a wound deep enough to leave scars that even time might not heal. For years, she had fought to bring her children closer to the center of royal life, believing that her marriage to Charles had earned them at least a fragile acceptance. But here, before the cameras and the whispers of Windsor, that dream cracked. Tom's absence at the gala was not a matter of oversight. It was a decision, deliberate and sharp, edged, wielded by a man who knew exactly what it would mean to her. It wasn't only her son who had been dismissed that night. It was her struggle, her perseverance, her attempt to weave her family into the fabric of royalty, all undone in a single, calculated move. Yet she stood there, head high, as though nothing had happened, because that is what the monarchy demands. Even as anger and hurt churned beneath her calm exterior, Camilla chose restraint over retaliation. She understood too well the fragile unity that held the royal family together, and she knew that striking back now would only make the cracks more visible. Those closest to her describe her as pragmatic, a woman who sees the world not through sentiment, but through a clear-eyed understanding of its limits. And yet even they could not deny what they saw that night. The way her hands trembled ever so slightly as she accepted congratulations, the faint catch in her breath when she smiled too long. She may have been realistic, but she was also quietly devastated. Later, when the cameras finally stopped flashing, and the guests began to disperse, there were those who caught the fleeting moment when she let the mask slip. Just for a second, a rare vulnerability surfaced. A hint of the mother who longed only to see her children treated with dignity, standing in stark contrast to the queen consort, expected to uphold the weight of the crown. It was a moment small enough to miss, but powerful enough to be remembered. And yet, this was not the first time Camilla's family felt William's cold resolve. At Westminster Abbey, all eyes bowed except when she walked past. In the ancient sanctuary of crowns and vows, where history is carved into every stone, an unspoken chill swept through the congregation as Camilla took her place. This was supposed to be her crowning moment, the ultimate vindication of decades spent climbing toward legitimacy. Yet the silence that greeted her steps was louder than any applause. Many in attendance felt it the icy pause, the careful avoidance of her gaze, as if the weight of everything she represented hung too heavy to ignore. While the ceremony moved forward with all its grandeur, the undercurrent of resentment rippled just beneath the surface, threatening to break through the pageantry. William and Catherine stood near the altar, their faces composed, but to the keen observer, their reserve was unmistakable. Not one glance of warmth passed between them and the queen consort that day. Their movements, deliberate and cool, spoke volumes in the language of royals, where nothing is said outright but everything is communicated. Catherine, known for her effortless grace, kept her distance, her expression polite, yet unreadable. William, though dutiful, held a posture that was both rigid and detached, his eyes betraying nothing yet saying everything. To those who knew, it was clear this was more than ceremonial protocol. It was a subtle, calculated message. And perhaps Camilla sensed it too. In the weeks leading to the coronation, she had insisted on filling her guest list with her closest friends and family, sidelining figures who had once championed her integration into the royal fold. To her, it was a chance to assert herself fully at last, to surround herself with those who stood by her when others would not. But to the rest of the royal family, it was a slight that cut deep. Excluding key allies and filling pews with her personal circle of confidants was seen as both reckless and disrespectful, a breach of the delicate balance that kept the monarchy afloat. The media was quick to seize the narrative, splintering public opinion into two camps. Some viewed Camilla's guest list as a bold statement of independence, a mother and queen unapologetically embracing those she loved. Others condemned it as proof she could never rise above her own self-interest, casting aside tradition in favor of personal loyalty. Headlines painted her alternately as a victim of cold-hearted royals and a queen overstepping her place. Social media only fanned the flames, with every detail of her guest list dissected and debated endlessly. Behind palace walls, the whispers grew louder. Long-standing staff murmured about fissures widening beneath the polished veneer of unity. Trusted insiders spoke of lingering bitterness, of battles fought not with words, but with carefully measured slights, guest lists, and glances that cut like knives. The grandeur of the coronation had cloaked the fractures, but to those watching closely, the fault lines were undeniable. These fractures would deepen when William made another decisive move against Camilla's sister. In William's quiet campaign, no family member of Camilla was spared, not even her closest sister. Annabel Elliot, who for nearly 2 decades had worked as the trusted hand behind the duchy's aesthetic and interior designer, who had left her mark on countless royal properties, suddenly found herself on the outside looking in. Her name, once synonymous with refinement and reliability, was quietly removed from the list of royal contractors soon after William assumed the title of Duke of Cornwall. It was not announced with fanfare or explanation, but the message was unmistakable. The winds of change were blowing through the royal halls, and they carried with them a chill that reached even the most familiar of faces. Annabelle's relationship with the monarchy had long been more than professional. She was Camilla's confidante and constant companion, her quiet anchor through decades of scrutiny. Her work had been praised for blending tradition with warmth, and her contributions were deeply valued by Charles himself, at least until William took the helm. Once in charge of the duchy, William made swift, deliberate decisions, and among them was the choice to end her lucrative contracts, signaling that his vision for the monarchy left little room for familial privilege. The choice was cloaked in the language of modernization and efficiency, but beneath that polite rationale lay an undeniable intent to further distance Camilla's family from the inner workings of the crown. To the public, the move was interpreted as yet another chapter in the growing saga between William and Camilla. The media, ever eager to dramatize royal intrigue, framed it as a pointed stand, a future king stripping away the remnants of a queen's influence. Headlines painted William as the reformer, bringing transparency and discipline to the duchy's finances. Analysts praised his resolve, arguing that the monarchy could no longer afford to appear as a refuge for nepotism. But for Camilla, this was no matter of policy. It was personal. First her son, and now her sister, swept aside in the name of principle. With each decision, it became harder to deny that her family was being systematically erased from royal favor. The emotional toll on Camilla deepened as whispers spread through the palace. Annabelle's quiet departure cut deeply, striking at the core of her fragile sense of belonging. Those close to her described the queen consort as increasingly withdrawn, masking her frustration behind polite silence. Though she outwardly maintained composure, each loss chipped away at her carefully constructed facade, leaving her more isolated than ever. To the outside world, these choices may have looked like strategy, but to Camilla, they felt like punishment. As the royal walls closed in, King Charles was forced to confront the storm gathering within his family. Behind closed doors, the king summoned his fractured family, hoping to mend wounds that ran decades deep. In the quiet of the palace, far from the cameras and the orchestrated smiles, Charles faced the impossible task of balancing two loyalties that tore at him from opposite ends. On one side stood William, his heir, steadfast and principled, unwilling to compromise the traditions he believed were sacred. On the other stood Camilla, his wife, bruised and humiliated, her family systematically pushed aside as if they never belonged. To Charles, both were indispensable. But the longer he hesitated, the more the cracks in his family threatened to shatter the very foundation he had fought his entire life to preserve. The stakes were no longer just personal. The press had begun circling like vultures, feasting on every whispered rumor, every clipped exchange caught on camera. What had begun as a quiet family feud was now teetering on the edge of a public relations disaster. The monarchy's strength lay in its image of unity, poise, and resilience. But Charles knew that even a hint of division could invite scrutiny they might never recover from. The decisions made in that room would not only decide the fate of their relationships, but also shape the future of the crown itself. So he called them together, choosing not the throne room or a council chamber, but a smaller, more intimate space, where titles felt secondary to blood. The air was heavy as they gathered, the silence sharpened by years of suppressed grievances. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a king, but the plea of a father and husband. He reminded them that the monarchy had endured because it stood as one, because no matter the wounds inflicted behind the curtain, they were expected to present a united front to the world. He urged them to set aside pride and pain, to remember the duty that bound them all, even when it hurt. Charles did not choose sides. He could not. Instead, he moved carefully, acknowledging William's steadfast devotion to duty while quietly validating Camilla's anguish. In measured tones, he urged William to temper his resolve with compassion, and he reassured Camilla that her worth within the family was not diminished, no matter what had passed. There was no shouting, no grand reconciliation, but his message was clear. The monarchy's survival depended on their ability to coexist, even if harmony remained out of reach. What emerged from that room was an uneasy truce, sealed with polite words and fleeting smiles that betrayed nothing to the outside world. But beneath those smiles, the tension still simmered, waiting for its next chance to surface. And as the cameras captured fleeting moments of civility, the silent battle for the monarchy's soul raged on, leaving us to wonder, how long can they keep the facade intact? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.